Yes, I can hear you perfectly. How has your day been?
The day's been good. I was on a ski trip till yesterday. Just got back yesterday, and today was just yeah, getting
That's
back in life.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Are you based in San Francisco right now?
Based out of the Bay Area. Yeah, San Francisco Bay Area. Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time out of this evening on like Martin Luther Jr.'s Day and also like accepting my invite on Christmas Day. It really means a lot to us.
No, it's an honor. Like I'm always, and I see some familiar faces also. Like I'm always engaged with the student community. So very, very excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
That's wonderful. Yep, if you're ready, we can kickstart the fireside chat.
Absolutely ready.
Awesome. So, just to start, let me briefly introduce Mr. Aggarwal's background. So, he is a strategic leader and also an AI evangelist who has been the global head of strategy, partnerships, and AI solutions at Google Cloud. He also leads the global strategic alliances, oversees a multi-billion portfolio with a lot of experience in AI, education, and technology. So, Mr. Sharad also serves on multiple advisory boards and is one of UCLA Anderson Alumni's board of directors. So, to kickstart our questions for today, firstly, we will start with some welcoming and origins. So, for students trying to imagine the role, do you mind sharing your journey and what does a typical week actually look like for a global head of strategy, partnerships, and AI solutions at Google? So, who are you talking to and what problems usually land on your desk?
Wonderful. So it's a great question, right? So first of all, right, like a quick intro, I head the global strategy and solutions for Google. Google Cloud specifically, that's the product area as we call in Google, right? These as PAs. So I had the strategy solution and I also lead the vertical, which is AI data solution. And what that means is basically anything which makes AI an AI, right? When you type
Mhm.
something, the human kind of response you get, all that work that goes behind the scene. That's what my organization does. And in terms of what exactly what we are doing as part of this team, so with any, I would say, large organization, I would not say just Google, but any big tech or any big organization, there's typically always a question in terms of uh, build versus buy, right? So, and I would say in terms of strategy also, typically large organization have a strategy that we should be focusing on what we do best and anything around that, right? To run the entire organization, how do we leverage some partners and other, I would say, capabilities which are present in the world, right? Who do that thing, but that particular thing best, right? So my team actually, in layman's term, like looks for those opportunities across the globe in terms of who are these companies, right? Like who are doing some cool things, right? Who are the partners who are actually who can augment some of the services we are doing so that we can focus on the core areas, right? So it could be cutting across some of the engineering work that we could be doing. Similar to, for example, the design could be Google, right? But the execution partner could be like of one of the consulting companies, some of those. Similarly,
Yeah.
for AI work also, right? Like while we render the design, we leverage a lot of partners, right? So those are the kind of things we are looking in terms of, I would say, partners. So most of the time we are fishing for, first of all, who are the partners who could be strategic partner to Google. Then we look at the 360-degree relationship, like which is like sell to Google where we are buying services, then buy from Google where they are buying services from us, and then sell with Google, which is a go-to market, right? So that's typically
Mhm.
that me and my team does.
That's awesome. And it sounds like there are a lot of like partnerships involved and a lot of collaboration with different teams across different functions. So I imagine it must be a pretty intense role, and you have to like organize a lot of different tasks every day. So how do you usually like manage your time, and what do you think like young people like us can learn from? For example, when we are navigating our like college careers, and were there moments early in your career when you felt unsure about like your direction, were you on the right path? So how did you navigate those feelings of uncertainty back then?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I would say even till date, right? Like I'm constantly learning and evolving myself as a human being, because
Mm-hmm.
I would say you call it like a CEO's dilemma or leader's dilemma, whichever way you want to put it. I think one challenge, as I would say, folks who are just starting out their career and all, as you grow, that you would face would be one resource that you would always be short of would be time. And that is where
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very, very heavy on how do you prioritize? How do you actually clear the noise? And this is where typically, like as I'll answer the first part of the question, that I always try to bucket my work in terms of big rocks that we are trying to achieve, right? Many a times what happens, right? You get slammed with so many things, right? Like there could be an escalation somewhere, there
Yeah.
could be somebody chasing you, there's a chat, there's an email. But how do you actually, first of all, take a step back? And that's what I do, right? Beginning of the year, I do that every week also with my weekly priorities. I do that for monthly in terms of you need to I try to bucket in terms of what are the activities that are taking me closer to the goals that we have set for the organization, right? That's a big strategy that we look at, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of you might have heard of the framework, right, where you have this four quartile kind of a thing, right? Something which is urgent but not important, something which is urgent and also important, something, right, like important and strategic but not urgent. So those are the kind of tools I typically look at in terms of prioritizing my work, right? But I must tell you, there's no silver bullet. Like it's always hard in terms of because organization will always have limited resources. And I all sometimes jokingly say, right, no matter how high you go in your career, one constraint
Mm-hmm.
you have to live with, you will always be short of resources. It could be $1 trillion company, it could be anything. How do you optimize your time? How do you prioritize? That's the name of the game for you to be moving towards the path to success, right? So that's what I typically say.
Yeah.
That's how I prioritize my work, right? Now, I think the second part of question was slightly different. You were asking me that were there times in my career, right, where I felt right in terms of what direction should I pursue? Am I taking the right direction or not, right? And I would
Mm-hmm.
say it's not just once, it happened many times, right? First of all, I would say when I was like also at the similar age, right, like many years ago, just starting out my career, I was at that, I would say the crossroad as well, right? Like, hey, what path I should be pursuing, right? I know it was like a
Yeah.
lot of people around me, they had this passion for music and all that. And I was figuring out, right, like, hey, some like I always liked technology, but I didn't know. Everything seemed interesting. Everything also seemed like, hey, what should I narrow on? So one of the thing I actually did, and do till date, and that's the reason you'll see I had very like multiple pivotal moments in my career, like where I tried to do different things. Is I was always curious about going deep into a subject, right, and also
Mm-hmm.
understanding what's the upstream demand that is driving the need that's coming towards me, right? That helped me actually to keep, I would say, the curiosity mindset. That helped me to continue to navigate my career, right? There were times actually where I felt when I, like, I would say, later in the career, I made some career moves also. In a short term, those felt like probably I did the bad move, right? But when I zoom out today, I look at it. Actually, I
Mm-hmm.
think that is an advice also to a lot of people, because I speak to a lot of like folks, right? Like starting their career, even mid-level career, where they say, "Oh, that was the bad patch of my career and all," right? But I tell you, right?
Yeah.
Like I assure everybody, there's never a bad move. It's always a learning. You never know when it's gonna pay out. Because when I zoom out, and I'm happy, right? Like when we have more time and all to even share those specific anecdotes. When I zoom out, I actually realize the time I felt those were the bad moves in my career. Today, I feel like those are the best period of my time, that it helped me to push out of my comfort zone and actually try something new. And those are the skills and some of the things that are like helping me in today's environment. So that's a long short of the answer that I want to give.
That's wonderful. And I think that there are a lot of takeaways that we can get from that super amazing answer. You have a lot of wisdom in your career moves. And I think it's really true that sometimes when we see a period of time which feels more difficult or feels like unsure, but sometimes it is a precious gift for us to learn from that experience and also learn from our past mistakes and failures. Um, and I also see that, Sharad, you mentioned that sometimes you're always short on time and resources. So prioritizing the important things are very important, especially when you are dealing with very high stakes business decisions. So just now you mentioned that there were people who like helped comment on your career choices. So were there any like mentors or supporters who made a meaningful difference in your path or helped you grow at moments when you needed it, like whether it is in your early career or also at UCLA? And how did you find these people, or did they find you themselves?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and
Thank
one of the
you.
reason I doubled down on mentoring myself because mentors have played a very key role in my career choices, and even like I would say many a times in terms of my job switches also. So I would say in terms of finding these mentors, my one of the thing actually I usually guide people, right? We are all human beings, right? Even mentors are like they do not come from a different planet, right? They're human beings just like you and me. So one of the things you have
Yes.
to look at, right? And human beings are always looking for value exchange, right? And
Mhm.
everybody is busy, right? So one thing you have to understand, and that's what I did when it came to mentorship also. I always try to find in terms of like I would say instead of trying to jump into what I want from them, right? I always looked at what I can contribute, right? It could be something about, right? Like, hey, if there's a skill set I want to learn, right? I offered, hey, I'm actually good at this. Is it okay if I can actually take small portion of the thing, right? Like that I could do, I could help you. I was very, very vocal about those things, right? Like those are that's the way I actually navigated. And that's the reason, even though I started as an engineer, I moved into operation. Very soon I moved into strategy. Very soon I moved into sales, right? I have done like various hats, right? And all those things
Mhm.
would not be possible if I did not have mentors, if I did not have somebody who said, okay, let me spend some time with you in terms of like helping you achieve your goal or guide you through that. But it was more like how actually I am also, because they also used to get bombarded by multiple people reaching out to them, right? So I think
Of
figure out
course.
that way. And that's the reason when people look for job search also, right? I tell those folks also that unless and until let's say folks like us make it as a full-time job that hey people send resume and we start like referring and all that, right? It's not possible, right? Like so many requests you get.
Hmm.
So even when you guys are looking out and all, right, reaching out to people, right, don't just like I would say flood them, right, with the resumes like, hey, this is my profile and all that, right? In fact, companies even have policies like how well do you know this person? How well do you know the job this person does, right? So figure out a way how you can stand out, right, where you can gel into their ecosystem, right, where they can actually gauge their work. There is a value exchange happening. That's how I have done it, right? And many a times I'll tell you, right, some of my jobs like they were my customers, right, who said, hey, like we have like this referral, right, is a great guy who I think would be a great value to your company and all that, right? Like so that's what my recommendation was. So I would say mentor, never ever shy away from, I would say, looking for those. It could be like within your company, it could be within industry, it could be a friend. I think mentorship has a big role, and that's the reason in my current age, I feel that this is my time to pay it forward, and that's the reason I double down on mentorship a lot.
Yeah, I think that's very true and also something that we have to learn from. Because, Sharad, you mentioned, like, firstly, being vocal about what you need and also what you can offer. So it is a reciprocal and also genuine connection between you and the mentor you're reaching out to. I think that's super important for us to learn because sometimes it feels a bit transactional, or when people get busy, they can really feel from your sincerity, from your tone, like whether you're genuinely trying to learn something from them and also trying to connect with them on a personal level. So I think they're definitely very wise people. Like Sharad, today, you teach us a lot of different life and career lessons we can take away. But also, maybe sometime in the future, we can pay it forward when we have the ability and also we build successful careers to help people in need as well. So I think that's super meaningful.
Thank you.
So
Before
yeah,
we go to the next one, right, I also want to pick on, I think you used very good words, right? I think the genuine. I think I
thank
should have
you.
touched on that also. That's very, very important, right? That's the other thing I have seen in my career. More genuine you are, I think success and luck follows. That mantra has worked for me, right, successfully. And that's the reason, right, to your point, right? Like I come from sales, right? And I come from strategy. Sometimes I can even tell
Yes.
you what is an AI, what's a human being, and where the person is sincere, where the person is like just trying to get the point across or whatever. So I would say if you really mean something, genuineness, I'm telling you, people would follow. And I would say somehow I feel, right, like the whole I would say universe has some way of like carving out the paths for you, right? So my suggestion would be, even when you're reaching out a mentor, right? You don't need to just
Hmm.
have a fake appreciation or something, right? Just because you want to make a connect, hey, I like an article, right? It could even be a criticism for that matter, right? It could be anything.
Yeah.
I would say be yourself, be genuine, and I'm telling you, success would follow, right? That's very, very important, right? I would recommend.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we should definitely like try to be sincere in our communication and also like show true appreciation while also like being authentic and being ourselves. So thank you so much for recapping and wrapping that up, Mr. Sharad. So moving on to the next section, because Sharad, you've worked across like engineering, sales, as you've mentioned, procurement, cloud strategy, risk operations, and also worked with so many like C-suite and high-level executives. So, like maybe echoing with the genuineness that you mentioned just now, or some other qualities, what do you think has helped you the most when you tried to build trust and partnership across all of these different functions, which often like don't speak the same language? Like some functions are more technical, some are more like personal, and also require like interpersonal communication.
Yeah. So it's a very important point, right? So first of all, I think from a previous comment, right, like one, you need to have a genuine interest in terms of the problem you are solving, right? In this particular case. So whenever I actually got into these areas, and because I come from a consulting background, my current team is all consultant, and I actually take sessions, right, for my team as
Mm-hmm.
well. So one of the thing, my in I would say inner goal whenever I'm going after something is, how do I gain the status of a trusted advisor, right? Like whatever I'm saying, people trust. In order to do that, first of all, you have to go deep into that, I would say, the problem or the function that you're dealing with, right? Whether it's procurement, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's, I would say, sales, whether it could be engineering, all that kind of stuff, right? And I come from business background, so even when I deal with techies, it doesn't mean, right, I start learning coding or I start becoming what they are. I need to understand what is it that they are doing, like solving through technology, what's the business problem, right? So I get into the common ground.
Mm-hmm.
Other thing is, you need to understand, again, it comes to the value exchange that's happening, right? When you are actually dealing with these people, other thing I try to understand, what is their motivation, right? What are the objectives that they have, right? Where can we align those? That's the part I work with, and that's the reason many a times, right, people get into conflicting situation, and you guys will face a lot, right? Because these days
Mm-hmm.
organizations are becoming increasingly matrixed, right? Gone are the days, okay, you have this whole hierarchy and all because there's a reporting relationship. You can give a top down directive, everybody's listening to you. No, there would be times where you would be dealing with people, and that happens with my team half the time, right? And during the interview, also actually ask that question, right? there is a difficult change management decision you have to convey, and the people on the other side are outranking you, and that happens all the time, right? How do you
Yeah.
still basically drive influence? How do you still actually meet the objective that have been set out? And in order to do that, I always believe in this principle, and I teach my team as well, that go deep into the subject, right? And showcase them what is the value to the company or the objective that we are driving. And then also listen back, right? There is a possibility, I tell them, that either you will convince them that you are actually able to generate better value by taking the path you are offering, or you might get convinced. Be ready for that as well, right? And it has to be all
Mhm.
database, objective, quantity driven. And when that happens, nobody has any concerns, right? Because many a times I feel these friction happen in large organization and all that, right? Because we convey not a solution, but we convey a directive. Because I have been told by my organization to do something, I say, hey, this is a change we are bringing. We do not speak the language of the person who's been running. Hey, this is a value you will get, right? This is what we could do. Or even understanding the objection, right? For example, the person could
Yeah.
say, hey, it's a Q4 period, my team is busy in sales, I don't have time for your fancy project and all that, right? So that's how I have always operated, understanding those motivation and working towards that and giving the right solution. That's the reason even today, inside myself, the identity I have for myself is I'm the solutions guy, right? And that's what my team is all about. So that's how we look at it.
Yeah, I think that is very, very true. And also, I learned so much from that answer that you shared with us. And because, like, all of the times we are humans, we have emotions, and people also bring emotions to work. And you mentioned the friction with different stakeholders within such a big company like Google. Of course, there is like hierarchy, and how, like, maybe for us starting out as juniors in the company, maybe like as interns or as analysts, how do we deal with those types of environments when we're communicating? So what you mentioned about like being sticking to the facts, quantity driven, and also being objective in our analysis and being like reasonable, so people might be able to see the value in what we offer, while also being open to like constructive criticism, so we can work towards a common goal and reach the best solution. So I think that's very wonderful, and we can all learn from that too.
I
So,
think one more thing I
yeah.
want to pick on, right, the constructive criticism that you mentioned.
Hmm.
So another important thing would be, don't try to be right all the time. It's okay,
Yes.
right, in organizational culture to be wrong, and be also open about, right, instead of, I would say, just saying random stuff, it's also okay. Hey, I don't think I have looked at from that perspective. Let me go back because you touched upon your analyst or whatever. Like, let me review my data points once again and get back to you on those things, right? So that's also
Hmm.
okay, right? Again, it boils down to being genuine, right? Don't try to be right all the time, and nobody expects you to, right? Like, end of the day, we are human beings, right? And end of the day, the data can be looked at in million different dimensions, right? Like, so there is
Right.
any time there could be a possibility, whether in a business analyst or whichever role, that the dimension that you slice and dice the data, right, the exec could be looking at it totally different. And that's where the governance and steering happen. So that's another tip I give everybody, I would say, folks who are young, starting out in the career, to be prepared for.
Yes, I think definitely like we should all try to be like we should learn from other people's opinions and advice. And I think that's really the magic of teamwork as well. When you have people that have like different skill sets and mindsets as you, when they give you the sort of sparks, then you can get the inspiration. And so the company can innovate and also improve on your previous decisions. And it really helps the company and the team move forward too. Thank you. So, like just now, because you also mentioned like sometimes there might be friction in communications, and Mr. Aggarwal, because you lead so many high stakes negotiations and also these multi-billion-dollar transformation efforts. So, in these periods of time, how do you stay steady and calm under so much like stress and pressure? And was that mindset trained or did it come with time?
So negotiation, I would say, I also take, by the way, sessions on negotiation within our organization,
Hmm.
because me and my team are constantly negotiating. negotiating, right? And these are multi-million dollar deals, as you rightly alluded to. So one of the things actually I teach in negotiation, and by the way, right, like I enjoy negotiating. I'll probably, when there's the right opportunity, I'm happy to take that session for this group also in terms of negotiation. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Negotiation, I actually advocate as a life skill, not just as a business skill. Because negotiation, we are always negotiating, right? Like in a life, right? Like I give some example even in my, I would say one of the courses that I do, whether it could be like negotiating in family, right? Like, hey, whether you should be going to Hawaii for the next vacation or whether you should be going to, I don't know, Spain, right? Or it could be like, hey,
Yes.
negotiating with your kid. Like, I have an 8-year-old son who keeps asking me, hey, dad, I need more screen time on Roblox, right? It's like whether I should give him
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes, not give it, and all that, right? Like, all those kind of stuff, right? Negotiation is always happening. So one of the things I would say in negotiation is how I stay calm and all that. First of all, I don't have this attitude that I have to win. It's all about, right, like negotiation is successful, and I'm happy for you guys to even like do a Google search or whatever, right? Negotiation, as per data, is when both parties actually walk away with that we have won in the negotiation, right? Again, going back to the principle of the value exchange. And the way I actually go about any multi-million dollar negotiation or even a small negotiation is all about, I first of all look at in the quantitative way, right? So it would be
Mm-hmm.
more about, let's say I'm buying something from a partner, right? For me, it would be more like what is a fair value, right? What are the other levers? What are the things that they are seeing that I'm not seeing, right? And that's how then you navigate in terms of weaving that across, right? Like, hey, we're having that conversation through a database kind of a thing, right? Like that's how you look at the negotiation, right? And many a time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the requirements are so high level, right? Even vendors might not realize that, right? And there are times where I even reverse engineer the margin, right? And we have a conversation around the partner, right? Hey, typically, I think this is not that high margin of a business. So how can we actually get to the middle ground? Many a times we even give them like opportunities in terms of, right? We even coach them, right? Like how they can actually make a commercial structure. So it's a win-win opportunity for both the parties, right? So that's how I stay
Yeah.
calm by having more of a database approach. I do my research before getting into the negotiation, and then we actually start building from that, and that's how we lead to the successful outcome.
Yeah, I think I really appreciated that answer. And also, like you mentioned, not just in work, but also in family. And I imagine like family must be the balance to the stress of work that you have as well. So do you think like maintaining such a mindset to keep yourself like open to like stress relief methods is also pretty important when we are at work because I imagine like after a long tiring day of work, you go back home and you also face your wife and children, and it's a lot of like burden too because like you have to spend time with them, but I imagine it brings you a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment in life as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, I double down on my comment that I recommend everybody in this group, right? Either pick a book or whatever, because negotiation is something you would definitely need in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, be it personal or even in any job, because one of the, and with AI coming in especially, right? A lot of, I
Yes.
would say, the subject matter would be easy to be accessed, but I think your key skill would become, and imagine both parties will be equipped with AI, right? So the stakes would be much higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the future, the biggest premium anybody would get would be on their influence skills, right? Like how you are able to actually drive influence in terms of meeting the objective, right? So that's very, very
Mm-hmm.
important. So I recommend everybody that either go through a course, watch a YouTube video, read a book or whatever. But this is something would be very important, no matter which industry you are pursuing or anything. Negotiation, please learn about that, right? Like that's one thing. Now you talked about the second aspect. So I'll try to find the name of the book also, but long time ago I had actually read this book which talked about, and maybe you guys can search, not if not the book, it's called The Wheel of Life, right? Like that was very, very inspiring framework for me, which actually has pockets for that how actually in our life you should actually balance. And by the way, if I could like switch the camera or something, I'll show you. I have that on my
Oh,
basically
wow.
board as
That
well.
would be awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So that wheel of life, right? Basically,
Yeah.
it circles for that in life. You need to devote time and keep feeding, right? Equity to each aspects of your life, right? I would say excess of like feeding only one particular area of your life would have bad effects in the other, right? And some of those things I would say it has is one, definitely your work life is there, your personal life is there, your social life is there, your financial life is there. So all these
Mhm.
elements, right? It has a very, very good framework, and I, like as I said, just do a Google search or something to find that picture or whatever, right? So I actually follow that, right? And I keep like periodically keep checking, hey, am I actually addressing all aspects of my life or not? And wherever I'm not, I actually start doubling down, start amping up or amping down some aspects of my life, because all these aspects are very, very important. Because I'll tell you, like early in my career, I have also been the victim of just doubling down on one particular thing, right? Like a day in and day out, like,
Mhm.
and ignoring a lot of other aspects, right? But it has an impact as I grew as a in my age, in my career, everything, right? Now I actually try to find as much of a balance, and that's how I manage it, right? Because I'm telling you, hanging out with friends is also important as like paying attention to your work. Spending time with
Yeah.
family is also important. Looking at your finances is also important, right? So that's how I
Mhm.
typically balance my time, and that's the reason possibly I was for a ski trip, right? Where I like got totally disconnected, spent time on myself with my family, and coming back refreshed for the coming week.
Yeah, I think that's particularly meaningful, especially for us because we're young and a lot of us just starting out just want to like focus only on our careers. And sometimes we hear about the news that are very saddening about like people being burnt out. So I think this Wheel of Life book, I'll definitely check it out. And I believe it would offer a lot of great advice as you do on how do we like balance out the different priorities in life and maybe sometimes like hanging out with friends, like reading other works, books and journals can also help us learn more wisdom, not just in our careers, but it also is a great feel for us to like keep on doing the best at our work as well. So maybe moving on to section three, AI strategy and enterprise. So for students like us now, AI headlines often make everything sound instantaneous. Like I just read about how Google partnered with like Home Depot this past week, and Google Cloud AI offers like this agentic AI that helps people shop better. And sometimes we read about like the Nvidia news. Everything just seems like so instantaneous, but also fleeting. So from your perspective, Mr. Agarwal, as someone working so long in this field, what is actually happening in enterprises right now? So, what is the hype around AI and versus like what is genuinely moving?
Yeah, so I would say first of all, I'm doubling down on AI, right? And because I
Hmm.
read it, I see the trends, and I'm at the intersection of that. So AI definitely is, I would say, for real. It's not like I would say some flash in the pan or some bubble that we are staring at. In fact, one of the keynotes I did recently on the future of work, AI is actually one of the disruption comparable to, I would say, some of the pivotal moments in the humankind, right? Like whether it was
Yes.
discovering fire, whether it was discovering, I would say, like, or the when computers came or printing came for the first time, or when the automobiles came. So that's what we are looking at, or internet, right? That was the other boom, right? It's not one of these sub segment which came in between, right? Like AI is for real. So an enterprise, especially like given I'm at the big tech, we are embracing it big time, where now everything that we do, we think with the AI first mindset. And this is where, in fact, in some of the sessions, I've also busted the myth of that doesn't mean that we as human beings will become redundant, right? That's the biggest myth which has been going around, and maybe thanks to social media as well, right? It's been like just like propagated like crazy. One of the thing I also want to tell you, like whenever these technological disruptions happen, there is always fear in the market that hey, this particular thing is going to take a job. When I would say tractors came, people thought hey, agriculture would go away. When I would say e-commerce came, people thought like marketing jobs will go away or print media would be dead and all that kind of stuff. But new areas start coming up because even with AI, right? If tomorrow a situation come as people like try to paint it, that hey, we will not be required, there's no value exchange happening, if like, then AI itself would be dead, right? Because you can't, like, there can't be a scenario where AI is actually exchanging money with itself and we are sitting on the sideline. Nobody's going to invest on that, right? So human beings will always be sitting on
Mm-hmm.
top of it, like figuring out the way of, I would say, right, right, like adding more complexity and the curiosity. So within enterprise, so first of all, be it like when we are setting up the goals for next year, like for example in last quarter, in 2025, a lot of our time was spent on setting up our 2026 goal. We have like put together what are the areas where we feel we can actually eliminate that work and not adding that much of value leveraging AI, and how we can better utilize a workforce to handling more complex tasks, right? So that's how we have started looking at it. And I would say a lot of areas where I would say, for example, contracting is one area, right? Like when we negotiate
Mm-hmm.
with I would say, businesses and all that, there's an element of contracting. A lot of work happens back and forth. We have actually implemented tools like which can actually AI can help us in terms of finding out what are the terms to negotiate. AI can actually help us scan through multiple proposal and RFP that partners have submitted, right? So those are the kind of
Yeah.
things which are coming up. One of the hype, or I would say word of caution, I'm seeing within AI is that with this AI being such a buzzword, it's like a FOMO kind of thing happening with people, that everybody wants to jump into this bandwagon, even
Mm-hmm.
without figuring out the right use case. That's the area where I think I caution everybody that AI is not just like, hey, you write a code and like it's up and running. AI is a big undertaking, especially in the organization like ours, like a large organization, because I always like many a times I openly say that, right? Algorithms are cheap, right? But the data is the real gold whenever it comes to AI. And when you go on any journey, any project, when it comes to like for an enterprise-based project in AI, you need to understand that hey, data is not just sitting somewhere that you access and you can just like start consuming it, right? It would be sitting in
Mm-hmm.
multiple silos. And then again, to my earlier point, not everybody would have the same motivation, right? Because they have their own priorities, right, to have your AI project successful, right? So how do you first of all have the right data strategy, that hey, this is how I will like access the data, this is how I will curate the data. You will also have to work with your legal teams and commercial teams, because you need to also have the element of responsible AI, otherwise that AI could misbehave as well. So how do you do that and then embark on the journey? Because in terms of hype, there have been people like who have just like used organizational resources without actually realizing the right use case, and such tools or platform are sitting like graveyards, right? Nobody's using, but the ROI is not there at all, right? So find the right
Yeah.
use case, and I sometimes also recommend, don't go after 10 use cases, right? Pick top three or top two or even one for that matter, which has the biggest return on investment and on your time as well, right? So that's how I will say that in terms of enterprise, where is the hype and where we are seeing the real use cases.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a comprehensive answer. And I think that's very enlightening because sometimes, like, we see a fear of missing out, as you mentioned, and it seems that there's a lot of like competition between like different AI platforms, and also a lot of the times we are navigating so many changes in the AI environment, like not just in LLMs, but also in a lot of different areas of our life. So how do we stay grounded? And you mentioned that it definitely like boosts the efficiency of like looking at the proposals in your organization, but also helping people to learn about these AI tools, I think is really important. And so yeah, I really appreciate like you analyzing like the ROI of using these AI, but also like how do we try to learn and adapt ourselves to this new technology, like how the discovery of fire, so we should embrace it but also exercise caution when we are approaching AI. So Mr. Agarwal, when you look at like what AI is actually changing today, where are you seeing the most like meaningful and durable value being created, and how can we like best capitalize or adapt ourselves to this change?
So first of all, I recommend everybody that AI, first of all, is not just for techies, right? So whatever
Mhm.
uh, a work stream or industry you are in, AI is almost like when computers came, right? Like knowing how to work on a computer, whether you are a financial guy, whether you are a medical guy or whatever you are, right? Like knowing to work on computer because that's boosts your efficiency, right? So AI is that of a necessary evil. Because I also give like this anecdote. Imagine, let's say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when spreadsheet for the first time came on like Microsoft Excel or whatever, right? You were the
Mhm.
best finance guy, and you said, "Hey, but I still love my calculator," right? So think about how company would look at it, right? Because you could be great, but they would also know you would be slow at the same time, right? So that's the reason AI, I would say, my recommendation for everybody would be in whatever field you are in, at least get the functional understanding of how to leverage it to boost your productivity. And then on top of it, add the layer of, I would say, a subject matter expertise to actually enhance because AI is not a lift and shift solution. It's actually taking you from point A to point B faster. So that's what my recommendation would be that you guys should be looking at it. In terms of, I would say, broad trends that we are seeing in the market currently, I think you already touched upon it. Agentic AI is like definitely a big theme that we are looking at, where we are actually enabling AI to actually take actions on our behalf. So that's a big
Mhm.
field. And that would require, I would say, a lot of stuff in terms of human in the loop because when you are enabling AI, you don't want it to go rogue, right? So how do you actually put the right guardrails and all and the frameworks, right? And defining those policies, that's very, very important. And second, very, very exciting opportunity I see, and especially for those of you who are looking at either entrepreneurial journey or I would say even thinking about joining like the passion that you follow, vertical AI is going to be the next big theme, right? That we are increasingly seeing where you have these large language models. Think about it more like a graduate student, right? Now how do you make that as a surgeon, right? So that would be vertical AI in terms of the proprietary data that somebody might have, enabling that AI to be actually trained on that. That will be a very, very big theme that you guys will see a lot emerging in the coming future.
Yeah, I think definitely like from agentic AI and also like the LLMs, I definitely also see a lot of change and a lot of new innovations that Google has with like Gemini Free. It helps a lot with like summarizing the different documents, but also like I see that Gemini might be partnering with Apple to help with like the next generation in Siri. So I think those are a lot of exciting trends that we should definitely use and also learn from in the future to polish our skills in workplace, but also not to be too reliant on AI when it comes to thinking. So I think those are very meaningful changes indeed. So maybe moving on to like governance and responsible AI, because I know Mr. Agarwal, you work deeply in like responsible AI, human in the loop ecosystems, and LLM support. So, could you share something that students don't usually see? Like, for example, the invisible components that make AI safe, compliant, and trustworthy. You also briefly mentioned this before, but would love to hear more about this.
Yeah, so I think as part of the AI data operations vertical that I lead within my organization, right? So this is where we are actually leveraging human beings to make AI more human. And this is where
Mm-hmm.
actually we draw a line or the governance policy. And that's a very, very important theme. And you see that like all the frontier labs who are working on LLMs and all that, there is like huge responsibility, right? Because with AI becoming more and more, I would say, intelligent, like so many use cases emerging, it's very, very important we do it in a compliant and in a safe way. So those are the
Yeah.
areas. I would say that's the reason there are like I would say increasing new roles that are emerging, right? Like which is also an opportunity for a lot of folks who are come from compliance background, be it I would say chief AI governance officer to chief data officer and all that, where we are constantly defining the policies, we are constantly defining the guardrails for AI to actually give the right and the appropriate answer. And it could be in the form of like, hey, you ask a question which you feel like ideally should not be answered and all, you'll see the response, right? Be it from Gemini or any other AI that you're looking, hey, I'm not supposed to answer that because it could be causing harm or something. Or in certain cases, like bringing human in the loop element. Let's say, uh, while AI can help you, in, for example, in financial kind of like domain, you could be asking, hey, give me the stock so I like where I can double down and become a millionaire overnight, right? Like so, there
Mm-hmm.
also AI will put a disclaimer and all that. Hey, I'm not supposed to do that. So thinking about all these use cases, so a lot of work goes inside where we are actually making sure that the governance policies and all that things are in place for AI to take the give the right information. And with agentic AI coming in, that problem, or I would say the vulnerability, has become like more exponentially, or maybe it has further gotten amplified, right? So how do you make sure, right, like AI is taking the right decision? Because you don't want, right, like, hey, AI to probably like just go ahead and probably put a bet on a speculative stock and like later on say, oh, it was by mistake or I misunderstood it, right? So increasingly, I would say responsible AI component, so be it harm, be it in terms of taking the actions and all that, we are actually working, and there's a whole, typically all the organization now have this whole organization within their enterprise called Responsible AI Organization, which is constantly
Mm-hmm.
working in terms of refining policies, creating policies, the red teaming to actually find the vulnerabilities in the AI, to actually break it and also find the fixes for it, right? So those are the things which are happening in the background.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about all of these compliance and the teamwork and the so many effort that goes into like helping with the guardrails to regulate AI, I think that's super important too. Like as exciting as these new trends seem, definitely like keeping it responsible, not misleading, and also fact-based is really important. So I really appreciate all the work that your team helps with making this responsible AI a reality and also helping all the users because I imagine not just like educated users, but also some of the times it's like elderly or young children who approach AI. So I think it's really meaningful that this is kept safe for everyone to use. So, yeah, thank you. And moving on to the last section before we go to Q&A, sitting on like the UCLA Anderson Board of Alumni Board of Directors, I imagine Mr. Aggarwal, you also are deeply involved with like the Big Strategy Labs initiative that you kindly shared with us, and also a lot of young students. So, like, what advice would you give us? Like, if we swim out like 20 years from now, what sort of mindset, skill, or habit would you encourage young people like us to protect or develop, especially in this world that rewards speed, comparison, competition, and scarcity? And with so many trends like AI, and also other things bumming up and all the changes, how do we stay grounded in this time and age?
Yeah, so it's very, very important, especially in the age of AI. I think what would get rewarded in the future would be your orchestration. What I mean
Mhm.
by that is, I would say, just like for example, I'm not a musician, right? But and if you, let's say, place, I don't know, some sort of musical instruments in front of me, I don't know, I'll create a tune which will not make sense, probably like might give headache, right? With the same
Mhm.
instrument, right, like there could be a professional musician, right, who can create a note, right? Or you have notes, right, which have become viral, or like probably the rock star I would say musicians and all that. AI is going to be the same. Like, and that's the reason I keep busting the myth of that AI is going to take over everything. It's about how you are able to leverage AI and add your curiosity on top of it, right? Because just like internet, right? Like everybody has access to AI. And for internet also, I give an example, right? Internet was in front of everybody. But how many people actually created like unicorns, like be it Uber, be it Airbnb, be all that kind of like, or even Amazon for that matter, right? So AI would be
Yes.
the same. We all would have that access to it. It's not a lift and shift solution. So my suggestion would be identify what your superpower is, how actually with AI you can get to point A to point B, but then on top of it, add that unique yourself as a layer that will be successful, right? So that's what my recommendation would be. Be curious all the time, right? Like that's what my recommendation would be. And given you will always have time constraint and all that, prioritize to be able to move fast, because you will not have, like, I know in sometime during academic area we think about, hey, we have a lot of time, we keep thinking about things, but organization will give you very very short window, right? So how do you actually create a minimum viable product or an answer? You may not be perfect at all time, and constantly refining it, right? So I would say curiosity, moving fast, and prioritization, these would be the three, I would say, big areas at minimum I would recommend you guys should be like protecting at any cost.
Thank you so much. I think like those three key terms, curiosity, moving fast, prioritization, are super important. And we'll definitely remember that, especially when we are working in fast-paced environments or just like navigating the different decisions and making many important decisions. So thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal. And maybe my last question is, because many students right now, they're like either recruiting or sometimes they might feel behind when faced with like intense competition, not only with peers, but also when they navigate this world. So when you look back at your 20s, what will you tell someone who feels lost, or would you have any like words or encouragement for your younger self at that stage?
I think I'll go back to, in terms of first of all, the mentors. I think if you look around, there'll be a lot and more people who are there to support. So I would say I look at that and double down on my skill as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's what my recommendation would be for everybody. And I also want to buzz the myth, because a lot of people feel, because I've been reading quite a bit, people feel, hey, as a graduate it's very tough time because with AI and all that. I actually feel it's an excellent time. And I tell you, because during my age internet was a thing. And I jokingly nowadays say that, hey, wish I had opened a online bookstore at that time, right? Which I did not. AI is similar. You guys are at the same stage. That currently, if you look at it, there are so many simple use cases or low-hanging fruits that you guys could actually solve with AI, which over a period of time would only increase. For example, if you look back now, it's not that easy anymore in internet, right? Like, hey, that you create something and it will be an online sensation overnight, right? But there was an opportunity at that time, right? So AI is at that cusp. As the market keeps maturing, the I would say these modes would also become very very difficult to actually capture, right? So I would say think around, look around, like there's so many opportunities emerging. And even when you're applying, it's not that jobs are not there, right? People are also looking at it in your functional expertise. If I have two people, right, so two doctors or something, one says I also leverage AI, right, and the other person says, just like
Mhm.
that guy who said, hey, I hate spreadsheet, I only love my calculator. Organization might probably lean on the person, right, because they feel the person who leverages AI, right, would be more efficient, and I can actually derive better productivity out of those, right? So my recommendation would be, that's how I look at it, that look at it more as a glass half full, that you guys are in the era. That's what my recommendation to young people would be.
Thank you so much for your kind words of advice. And I think that's really true because sometimes we see AI as a challenge or something that replaces us. But as you mentioned, the glass half full, we can always be like optimistic about these different opportunities. I think we're very lucky to be at this age as well. And definitely like being open to change and just like upskilling ourselves so we can always be at the top of these trends and keep ourselves with the pace of all of these tech and new shifts. I think that's super important. So, if Mr. Agrawal, you're open to it, I'll open the floor to some Q&A from our audience today. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I think they're not just UCLA students today, but also working professionals from Ascend LA Metro and also from other colleges as well. So please feel free to raise your hand, open your cameras up, and ask a question.
Okay, I see a
Yeah.
question.
So maybe you can start from the chat. So do you see AI companies or carriers acknowledging negative environmental impacts and adopting sustainable data center systems? How would regulations on issues of copyright infringement and deepfakes that endanger children and create defamation issues direct AI modeling? Would responsibility be on AI providers or shifted to users?
Yeah. So it's a very good question, and I may not have the best answer, but I'll take an attempt. So first of all, I think we touched upon it that this is a real problem, and that's like a problem. And any time, right, that there is a new technology which comes up, right, whether it came to like for music streaming in the past, be it social media, and this is the real, uh, I would say the opportunity or the challenge. And this is where there's a huge investment currently going on in terms of responsible AI. And that's the reason, even before the models are released, there is a huge level of, I would say, compliance check, and I would say the policies and all that. These things are going through in terms of making sure the AI is fully compliant. Having said that, is it like fully sorted? Maybe answer could be no. But I would say increasingly, like I would say, organization like ours and others, right? There's a huge a focus in terms of making sure it's being used responsibly. This, I think, the second part of the question in terms of like who's responsible, right? And I know recently one of the keynote also, it was more like a thought-provoking question where they had actually shown me, and it's a real case study where I think some guest used, I think AI generated, or maybe it was the host in Airbnb, AI generated image of that the guest broke something, and they filed a claim of $5,000 or something. And then it was again the question of whether, hey, is it the AI at fault? Is it the guest at fault? It's, I would say, a big question, right? So I would say I don't have a great answer for that because this was also like more of a thought-provoking question and all that. But the idea would be the onus would be more and more on, I would say, the AI companies in terms of making the models robust and all that. Just like you see that, right? Like when we had a lot of issues of similar kinds, like the child safety and few other in social media, they had to set up right like all of these content moderation centers. In fact, in my earlier roles, I was also involved actually in terms of setting up some of these partnerships. So that's what I would suggest, like that there'll be lot many investment and focus and the dollars that would be going in terms of making AI more and more safe. And we will learn, right, as part of the journey, new use cases, new vulnerabilities, and that would be like again, as you always see, like there is a good versus evil that would be happening in this area as well.
Yeah, I think some of these trends are definitely pretty worrying and dangerous with like child safety, but it's very reassuring to know that Google and all of these organizations are working very hard to set up these partnerships and also the content moderation centers that Mr. Agrawal you mentioned. Those seem like very great opportunities and also work that we're doing in order to make AI and also like I think organizations are also embracing AI as a new trend alongside so many different technologies in the past. So when something new pops up, definitely like regulation is a very important issue, and it's so nice to know all of these new developments.
I
So
also want to
yeah,
add one more. There's an important question, right? Sorry to interrupt.
of course.
Uh, I think another thing you'll also see, like if you look at it from the opportunity side, I'm not going to say that all these vulnerabilities and problem will be solved by these big tech companies itself, right? There will
Hmm.
also be an opportunity, I anticipate. There will be, I would say, lot of new unicorns coming who could be actually helping this cause, right? Just like if you look at it, when computers came, right? Like some people thought about creating viruses, right? There was a surge of companies who created antiviruses, right? Like those become unicorns, right? Similarly, when internet came, like cybersecurity became an issue. A lot of these companies came up who are solving a particular like cybersecurity threat. Like some of these, if you see, be it Mandiant or a few others, right, which Google also acquired for billions of dollars, right? So here also I see even this responsible AI thing. I anticipate there will be new company that could be coming up who would be helping in terms of helping this cause of fixing these vulnerabilities as well. So that's another opportunity on the horizon. I see.
Yeah, that's very promising to see like this whole ecosystem of like unicorns and large companies. It really helps like bring different ideas and skill sets from these young founders. And I think that's great. Thank you so much for adding that, Mr. Agarwal. So I see, is it Celine or Celine? She has a question.
Hello, Sharad, and
To see you.
good to see you again. And I think it was really interesting when you said that your son was asking for more screen time, and you're like, "Oh, I don't know how." And I think a lot of college students were kind of learning how to adult and how to self-parent. So, as somebody who works so deeply in tech, do you have some rules and recommendations for digital hygiene? Not like rejecting AI or like rejecting kind of using more screen time to learn AI. But also, I do think, like, personally, I also need a better relationship with how I use my phone and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one, and I'll openly say I myself have been a victim of right sometimes getting sucked into right browsing. I read quite a bit, but definitely, I think there is a need for discipline and personal hygiene. I know there is an increasing trend of digital detox also going on at the same time. So my recommendation would be, I think, balancing that things that are giving you dopamine a fix, which you need sometime, and at the same time, right, like making sure, just like I said, right, the wheel of life or that balance wheel that I sometimes exercise, that's very, very important, right? So I would say extreme of anything is bad. I think bringing that self discipline would be very, very important. I don't know if I answered the question correctly, but these days, I think the options are so much, the technology is becoming so portable and all that. It's very, very easy to get sucked into this. And with AI, and I would say the targeted content and all that, right, you don't know where to stop, right? So I would say, as youngsters, also, yes, you have to sometimes draw the line and make sure that everything is balanced. That's what my recommendation would be.
Yeah, I
Thank
think,
you.
yeah. Sorry, I think Celine, you're muted.
I was just saying thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much too, Sharad. So we can move on to Christopher.
Hey, Sharad. I just had a question about something you said earlier, which is when you said you're the solutions guy, at this point in your career, do you find solutions are more in numbers or data or technology or more in people that you're working with?
So solution, and feel free to clarify if I'm going the wrong direction, if I'm understanding your question correctly. So solution typically in our organ, it's basically solution to the business problem, right? And many a times, in fact, I coach my team also. Uh, I think biggest mistake many a times we do that where we do not even understand the problem correctly, right? Because once you understand the business problem that you're going after, right, half the battle is solved. So solution, when we are talking about, it's actually going after the business problem that has been put in front of you, and then you use the data to find out, okay, what are the constraints that you are working towards. Then you look at the data, or I would say the success metric, what would actually mean that the problem is completely solved, and then who are the people that you would be needing to solve those problems, right? Do you have the right resources, all that, right? So when I say I'm a solution guy, it's about solving a business problem, right? The problem could be somebody saying, right, hey, I need to set up an enterprise, let's say in Mexico, right? Because we have a data center over there, we need to solve that particular problem. Then I need to understand further, right? Hey, what's the investment budget do they have, right? What does a success look like? What does capability look like, right? So solving that problem successfully, understanding like what would be the success metrics for that. That's what we mean by solution. So that's how and problems come in different shape and form. I just gave one example, but end of the day, it's about the business problem that you're going after. And many a time, as I said, right, I was saying, I keep cautioning my team member also. Sometimes they mistake problem with the request that has come. And that's where I poke my team to first of all, hey, poke them what is driving. Like, I'll give you another example, right? Sometimes team will say, hey, my stakeholder wants to get this contract done in maybe 5 days or something like that, right? Then my question to them is, right, hey, is contract the business problem or contracts is just an instrument, right, to enable something that they're solving for, right? Contract is probably to set up a data center and all that. So that's how we look at things. And yeah, these are the metrics we look at. I don't know if I
Thank you
answered
so
that
much.
question or this was the direction.
No, that was a great response. Thank you for it.
Thank you.
All right, I see Samuel has a question too.
All right, I appreciate that. I first want to say kudos to you. I really do appreciate your time and effort explaining, the whole world of AI and especially with your expertise in Google. So again, thank you so much for even having us and explaining it to us. First and foremost, I am a senior in high school and I am really trying to branch into, tech and major different categories in tech and especially AI is truly controlling it. One of my classmates have recently created a AI job recruiter or an internship recruiter because due to the fact of like how big major tech is, you kind of have to. It's a system that automatically like showcases all around what the United States, either a major big tech is coming up with a new internship or a new position already filled up. And it's at the point where we have to use these type of resources for you to really stand out or for you to really have a chance for you to, get a position or even get a look at your resume. So even beyond having what perfect resume or just a perfect list of achievements that you have as a candidate, how else could you truly stand out to these major companies or these major opportunities that could last a lifetime, seriously?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say, right, with AI coming in, even I would say, even when we are screening, it has helped us now, right? Because AI is being leveraged on both sides, right? So I would say companies are using AI to shortlist because by one stat, right, like we receive millions of resumes per month, right? And it's not humanly possible, right? Like to go through so many resumes. So AI is being leveraged, right, on the, I would say, the demand side of the house. At the same time, I think opportunity for you guys is earlier, I know it was very, very difficult, right? Because there are so many different kinds of jobs. How do I actually put my, and sometimes we are interested, right, in more than one kind of job, right? So how do you customize your resume in so many different ways, right? So my recommendation would be, first of all, customize your resume. You can leverage the AI and all that to actually make sure the it's relevant to the job that you are applying for. Second thing I would say, I always say, so I'll probably touch upon the resume aspect, then I'll move on to the other one. Um, because I do a lot of interviews myself, right? Whether it's hiring for my team or supporting other organization within our company, whatever, right? Because we have this whole cross-functional interview system and all that. So uh, you don't need pages and pages of data. Many a times people actually talk in their resume uh, what they know, right? What I think you should be talking more about what you have achieved, right? I think that's very, very important. Other thing would be many a times people try to put random stuff and all that kind of thing because just they want to be relevant for the post. Sometimes it has to be, organization are not looking for the perfect person. They're actually looking for a person who's entrepreneurial enough to solve the problem. In fact, one of the Google value itself is, right, like that you can thrive in ambiguity. So which means those problems have not been solved, AI cannot solve it, right? That's where you add value, right? So those are the kind of things. Last part, I would say, because I had actually done a session on, I would say, for women back to work, right, where I was talking about returners, how do they shine, how do they identify. Other thing would be with AI, you have an opportunity to build your brand, right? Build actually something even before you have a job, right? In terms of the area of expertise. I think you talked about the AI-based job recruiter or something, right? Those are the themes I think you should amplify, look at with the combination of that. I would say whether you're applying for a job, reaching out to a mentor for getting your reference, those are the elements I think I would say you would look at. But I think it's more of a silver lining I look at that AI being leveraged to screen the right candidates. I think that would also help, right, from the overall current environment. That's how I'll probably address it.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful and also like building our personal brand and also an area of expertise. I think this really echoes with what Sharad you mentioned earlier about like maybe learning one area and one field and being like the best at it really helps us like stand out among a pile of candidates. So I think like keeping up with the AI and the new recruiting trends and also just giving our best shot is super important. I know we're almost at time and I don't want to like occupy too much of your time today, Sharad, but if you're open to answering Bavik's question, he's one of
Sure.
Ascend Fellows too, like Christopher, we'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. This was such an insightful session. I learned a lot. I'm a business economics student at UCLA, and I plan to join and grow my family's business in shawls, stoles, and scarves in India after college. So we currently use Microsoft Business Central as our core inventory system and are expanding our e-commerce presence. So I wanted to like ask like how can AI help us with marketing, inventory management, and like scaling e-commerce? And like I don't have any coding background or experience. So like what do you think are some of the AI skills that would be the most practical for me to learn?
So I would say you don't need to learn coding skills or anything because your question is very, very business centric. So I would say you should, because there's a lot of development happening currently. There's so many use cases in terms of, like, I would say AI as a marketing agent, right? Like there are so many, I would say, AI based use cases that have been developed in terms of the pricing strategy that you can deploy in terms of, I would say, leveraging this AI thing. So I would say starting point would be, rather than I would say you should actually use one of the LLM itself and ask this question directly, right? Like, hey, what are some of the AI-based cutting-edge solution that I can deploy to increase the sales or maybe expand my go-to-market for e-commerce, for the textile business or whatever business you're talking about? That's how I look at it, right? Because these days there are a lot of agents around customer experience, there are a lot of agents around marketing. These are the hot use cases, right? And as you grow and all that, there are, I would say, bespoke solution which companies like Google that they provide, right? Like I know Home Depot was given as an example. Then there are a few others, right? Like that could be leveraged. So that's how I would recommend that you don't need to go into the technical side of thing, but I think you should be looking at some probably off-the-shelf solution around AI that could help in terms of expanding your go-to-market strategy uh, uh, online.
Oh, I'll definitely do this, so thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Sharad, for your time today. I really appreciate it, and all your support really means a lot to us. And I think that the takeaways of like being curious, prioritizing different areas of our life, and also just trying to be optimistic about all the changes and staying grounded in an age of AI really help us a lot, not just in finding mentors, but also in like recruiting and just being better people in general and living out a meaningful life. So, like, would you have a few final words for us or?
No, first of all, I think these were, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for organizing this session. And these questions were very, very thoughtfully, I would say, curated. So thank you,
Thank
Wendy.
you.
I really enjoyed the session. And I would say if there are more questions, as I said, like I do have a LinkedIn group also. Celine is part of that as well. I'm very excited to have her here as well. So yeah, folks can join. I can put it over here. Also, if there any question I could not answer or you feel there are additional detail, happy to stay connected. So that's what I would recommend. But I'm very excited because I always enjoy. It is actually my dopamine fix also when I'm able to actually interact with student like yourself who's going to be the future leader. Because I know you had a question for me 20 years ago. I actually see myself when I talk to
Mhm.
folks like yourself that where I was and I, I used to look for mentors like this. So super exciting session for me also.
Thank you. It really means a lot to me. And your encouragement would really help us like do better. And I really appreciate you sharing the LinkedIn group. I'm currently in it, and I feel that it's very meaningful that you continue to mentor students like us. And I think today I really see how humble, generous, and supportive you are. So I wish you all the best to Mr. Agarwal and your family. And just hoping that we can all take away a lot from this session. And it's really our biggest honor to have you today.
Likewise. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal. Have a great one too. Bye bye. Thank you everyone for coming too.